Hello, my name is Thomas David Joseph Ebner Sr. I was born in December the 11th, 1932. My great-great-grandparents, Thomas and Gladys Ebner, were born and raised in Alsace-Lorraine, Germany. They came to the United States in 1888, and they landed in the New York area and moved to Washington, Pennsylvania, which is on the west side of Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh. He was in the pottery business, a worker, not a business, but he worked in pottery. They lived there for about 20 years, and they had 3 boys. Elmer, my father, Uncle Ed, who eventually ended up in Youngstown, Ohio, and Raymond. Raymond lived in Columbus area. My father worked in Washington, PA, and came to Ohio in about 1891, and worked in the pottery business, and eventually he ended up working at the Repository, the local newspaper, as a proofreader. He had 7 years of schooling, and he was a very good speller, obviously. To be a proofreader, you had to be able to spell. He worked at the Repository for about 5 years, and his brother, his half-brother, his name was Charles, I believe, told my dad that he got him a job at the Watchworks, the Duber Hampton Watchworks, in 1992. And my dad said, "No, I'm very happy where I am. I want to stay where I am." And Clarence was his name. Clarence said, "Nope, I've worked hard to get you a job at the Watchworks, and you are going to take it." Well, my father said, "Okay, I guess I'll take it." So he went to the Watchworks. Now, the Watchworks were a combination of 2 factories. One factory built the cases for the watches, and the other factory built the works, the inner side works. They were, in order to gain employment, the city of Canton bought out a watchwork company in Newport, Kentucky. I think it's Newport, Kentucky, and brought it up to Canton, and that's where my grandmother worked or lived. She came to Canton with the Watchworks. The Caseworks were from somewhere in Connecticut, and they combined the city of Canton built 2 very nice manufacturing buildings, identical, and one was for just doing the casework, and one was just doing the works. My father was very talented. He worked in the works, the watch cases. And my mother was a kind of a secretary, and that's where they met. And they got married in 1914, I believe it was. Now, they had my mother and my father my grandfather, I said he had, my mother and father had 8 children, had 7 children. They had 5 girls and 4, no, they had 7 children. I raised that. They had 7 children. My brother Bob was the oldest, and then Virginia, and then my brother Bill, and our sister Mary Louise, and then I was born the 5th child, and my sister Margaret Millie was next, and the last one was Margaret. Now, of those 7 children, 3 are remaining. The other ones, my brother Bob was in the Second World War. He didn't have much of an education. In 1939, he decided he wanted to go to the war. And so he went to the Army in 1939. And in 1942, when Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, my brother was stationed there. He didn't get injured, but he was in Hawaii when the world Japanese started the Second World War. Bombed Hawaii. My brother Bill was an airplane pilot, and he flew 35 missions over Germany, France, and in the Second War out of England. He was a co-pilot. My sister Virginia was always ill, and she died when she was 54 years old. She was not a very healthy person all her life. And my sister my sister Mary was married to Jerry Russell, and she lived to be 72. She died. And then I was the next child, and I have my other child, my other sister, Millie, is still living in North Canton, Ohio, and my other sister, Margaret, the baby of the family, lives in Columbus, Ohio. Now, I personally was born in 1932. I was a depression, what they call a depression baby, because the Great Depression took place. Oh, I go back a little ways. In 1929, Russia bought out the watch company, Wolverhampton, and they took all of their tools and everything, and even some of their employees, they took them to Russia. They wanted to get the technical knowledge of how to set bombs and stuff like that. They were already looking at making war to the world. And so those employees that went, probably about 50 employees. In all, they probably had about 700 employees of that. When they closed down the watchworks and sold out everything to Russia, about 50 of them went to Russia. My father did not go. And my father, after he lost his employment at the watchworks, he was unique at the watchworks in that when they closed down the watchworks, only 2 employees remained in this big 2-building factory. And they were employed by the watch company to do warranty work on all the watches that were sold and still had some warranty life in them. So he lived there. He worked for the watch company for about 3 years. Just the 2 guys in this big factory. 2 guys worked in this factory and did repair work warranty work. After the warranty work was completed, he was released, and he went into having 7 children, and in the Great Depression, jobs were extremely difficult to come by. He worked in stores. He worked in John Hancock selling insurance. He'd go from house to house, picking up a dime for a policy or this or that. People just didn't have any money. And he worked for John Hancock. In 1937, he got a job working at a jewelry store in downtown Canton, Nussbaumers, and was a watch repairman. He repaired watches. At that time, people brought their watches back. There weren't any Timex. There weren't disposable watches at that time. Everybody, if they had a problem with their watch, they took it to the jewelry store and had it repaired. And so he worked at the jewelry store from about 1937 until about 1962. And he was very good. My father was very intelligent. And my mother was a wonderful, very religious woman, very, very much. She was remarkably religious, and never worked other than at the watchworks where she met my father and they got married. After that, she maintained the home. She maintained the home. He maintained getting some employment. So they both knew what they had to do, and they did it outstandingly. Okay. My father died in 1972. My mother died 4 months after he died. They were very devoted to each other.
How did they die?
They were 85 and 87. Just died, old age.
Sure.
Myself, I was born in 32. I was like I said, I was what they call a depression baby. My mother and father didn't have hardly any money to spend for anything. When I was in the 3rd grade, I started employment. I started working at the grocery store. I had a job from the 3rd grade the rest of my life. I had to more or less buy my own clothes. I had to buy anything I wanted. If I wanted a bicycle, I had to save the money and buy the bicycle, and I delivered newspapers. I delivered a Cleveland Plain Dealer, which was a morning paper. Before school, I delivered papers. After school, I went and worked for a grocery store in the neighborhood, stocking the shelves. So I worked in the morning before school. I worked in the afternoon from about 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock, stocking the shelves in this grocery store. I worked at a shoe repair shop. I shined shoes. I did a lot of different things.
Bowling alley?
I worked in the bowling alley. Yes, I did. KSC bowling alley. I set pins. I worked at Spees, which was a large grocery store in the downtown area. I did stock. I delivered. At that time I had a license. I delivered groceries to customers. I worked after I left them. I went to work for a very popular famous Frank's vegetable stand in the arcade market in the downtown market place. So, and I always had a job. And,
so you're let's trace back to family came from Germany. Went to went near Pittsburgh in the pottery business.
Right.
Why near Pittsburgh?
I don't know. I really don't know if they knew. Maybe some friends that they had in Germany had come over and said, "Hey, I think I can get you a job here."
Right.
So they came over. And,
what about your mother's side? Why Newport?
My mother worked, and my grandfather, her husband. I really don't know much about him. He died in 1939. He had a heart problem. He had diabetes. He died in 1939. My mother and father lived about 4 miles away from my grandmother and grandfather. And when he died in 1947, Grandma invited them to move in with her. She had a bigger home. And so we moved from 2nd Street to 8th Street, and we lived there until she died in 1947. 8th Street was a very nice, popular place. My father worked at downtown, lived probably 2 miles or so from the downtown area, walked back and forth to work every day. And he didn't like to work outside, so myself or my older brother, until he went to the service, had to cut the grass and maintain the house and stuff like that. Like I said earlier, if I wanted a new shirt, I had to make sure I could afford to buy it.
Right, no allowance either, right?
Oh heavens, the allowances weren't even considered. No.
Right.
But I didn't think badly of it.
Right.
It's just the way it was.
That's the way it was.
That's right. And I was very fortunate. My parents were very loving, and they took good care of us. And when they died around 74 or 75 in that area, I was fortunate. After I graduated from high school, I had the normal life. I had girlfriends when I was in grade school, high school. Then when I graduated from high school, I thought I wanted to be a priest. So I went to the seminary in Kentucky for 2 years and studied, and decided that I didn't have that calling, and I came out, and I went to work for the Timken company, the Timken roller bearing company. I came out in around November. I worked for them until February. I knew at that time I was going to be drafted into the Army. So instead of waiting, I knew in June I would be drafted into the Army. So I decided to, instead of being drafted, I volunteered and went down to the enlistment office in February and told them I'd like to get into the service, so I could get it over with, more or less. I was very fortunate. In the Army, I was sent to Camp Pickett in Virginia, and it was put into the medics. I went through boot camp and came out in June. Went in February, and in June I came out of basic training and went to Atterbury, Camp Atterbury, which was outside of Indianapolis, Indiana, and worked at a hospital as just a hospital aide. And one of the nurses there, she thought I had some potential. And so she said, would you like to go to school in San Antonio, Texas and become an X-ray technician? And I said, well, sounds good to me. So I went from Atterbury to San Antonio, Texas, and I was there for 6 months training to be an X-ray technician. And I graduated. I started in September, graduated in February. And as an X-ray technician, came out of San Antonio, Texas, went back to Indianapolis, and at that time, Indianapolis was closing down the fort and moving everything out to Colorado. So I was reassigned to go to Fort Carson in Colorado, which is about 40 miles south of Denver in Colorado. And I stayed there until I left. While I was stationed there, I was at a general hospital as an X-ray technician in the summertime. Now this was probably in June, July. In the summertime, they asked me, would you mind being a medic at a Boy Scout camp? I said, what? Well, we need a medic to go with the Boy Scouts and into around Aspen, Colorado. Yeah. So I was stationed in Aspen, Colorado for about a month and a half as a medic for the Boy Scout troop. I didn't do anything except put on Band-Aids or something like that, but it was a good time. And then I left there around September, middle of September, and was sent back to Fort Carson. In January, I was discharged, and I applied for schooling. While I was in the Fort Carson, I had talked to this friend who was also in the medics, and he said, I'm going to become an accountant. I go, what's an accountant do? And so he explained to me they audit books and they do this and that in the business world, and but you have to have a degree, a college degree. I said, well, I think I'd like that. I like mathematics. So I came out in January and went to University of Dayton, signed up, enrolled at the University of Dayton. The main reason why I wanted to get into the Army was because I knew that if I was to be discharged, I would be able to go to college. I would have the GI Bill. No way would I have been able to go to college if I didn't have the GI Bill. My parents just didn't have that kind of money. But I was very fortunate. I came out in January, started school middle of January at the University of Dayton, and I completed my degree and everything, and came out I went in about 55 and came out in June of 58. June of 58.
Why Dayton?
Why Dayton?
Yeah.
Couple of reasons. Both of my brothers were stationed at Wright-Patterson in Dayton, Ohio. University of Dayton was because it was a Catholic college. I wanted to go, and I liked the idea of being a Catholic college. So that's the main reason why I went to the University of Dayton. And I never regret it. It was very good school. I graduated in June of 58. In the meantime, I had met Mary Jo. She was in Canton. She was a good friend of my sister Margaret. They went to school together, high school together, and she was in Mary Jo was in nursing, learning how to be an RN. She came home with my sister one night, and they were sitting on the front porch. And I happened to be coming home that weekend, and I said, hey, she said, oh, I guess I better get going. I got to catch the bus to go home. I said, where do you live? She said, Altman Avenue. I said, well, my good friend Dick Stout lives on Altman Avenue. Could I take you there? So I had, at that time I had a car. I was one of the few people that had a car. I bought backtracking, I had bought a car when I went to Indianapolis. I always had a savings account, and I had built up enough money to buy myself a car. And in Indianapolis, I had this Chevy coupe, and I had it all the time I was in the service. I was a popular guy because I was one of the few guys had wheels. But going back to Mary Jo, I met her on the front porch of our house. She was a good friend of Mary Jo's, of my sister Margaret, and I kind of liked her. I said, can I take you home? And that led to a date at the Myers Lake Ball. We went dancing, and over the next year and a half, we became very close. In fact, I asked her to marry me, and we got married in January of '59. And life has been wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's a good wrap. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.